Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and I just want to talk to you guys about what I feel are some of the drivers of poverty, or some of the things that sort of create a more systemic poverty. And one of the first things I want to talk about is the cost of living. Bottom line is this: the more it costs to pay for the basics, healthcare, housing, education, food, the less you have to spend on other things, whether it's to invest that money in doing things that'll make you better off or just enjoying life, and can put you in sort of a life of poverty. So what kind of things drive the cost of living? Okay, whatever drives up the cost of the things we need to buy to live. So what drives up the cost of housing? What drives up the price of education? What drives up the price of healthcare? Partly it's a lot of the regulations that basically distort a lot of the incentives, make the pricing more opaque. In a lot of these industries, it's the credit policies that divert credit into these particular areas, allowing people to borrow more money than they naturally would and drive the prices up of things like housing and education. And again, more so the regulations creating opacity in prices in healthcare, taxes, and all of these things, because any business, anyone who has to pay taxes are going to try to make up for those taxes by charging more. So if labor has to pay more taxes, they're going to want more wages. And if the business has to pay more taxes and pay more wages to make up for those taxes, then they're going to charge more to the consumer. And this all just kind of keeps growing upon each other. And then the cost of living just keeps rising and rising and rising and rising. And then that just ends up crowding out all of our incomes. But also, one way to overcome a rising cost of living is to take home more money, meaning you need access to opportunity. And that can and basically that can get squashed in a couple of different ways. One, well, more taxes on you personally means you get to keep more of your paycheck. So even if your income is growing, but they take more, well, there's less of it to deal with that rising cost of living. Or you can try to pursue more higher income opportunities. But if there's occupational licensing and you got to take time away from working, spend money for training to achieve these licenses, it can prevent people who are the poorest from being able to pursue those opportunities, because they can't afford the time off, they can't afford the training to pursue those opportunities. Or if you make more red tape, more paperwork, more permits in order to start a business, that's going to make it, again, the poorest are less likely to ever be able to start a business, ever be able to pursue those other opportunities. So they're dealing with this rising cost of living, yet they're seeing the income they already have shrink as there's more taxes and burdens and placed on it, or they're not able to pursue other higher income opportunities. So basically, again, the cause of poverty number one is the cost of living, and all these policies, they just drive up the cost of everything around us. And cause of poverty number two is all these policies that make it hard to pursue opportunities to increase our own personal income through entrepreneurship, through attaining skills, going into new industries, etc. But then what happens at the third cause of poverty is sort of the most pernicious one, is the culture of poverty. What happens is that people get frustrated. They see this happening. They see that no matter what they do, they have a hard time making more, yet everything keeps costing more, and they feel like they're just stuck. And then you see the people who are doing really well, and you become sort of resentful, and you feel like the game becomes sort of rigged. The game is sort of rigged against you, and to an extent it is, oftentimes through policies that need to change, not necessarily because everyone can just do whatever they want, not because we have a free market, but because policies have been set in a way to make it unfair. But people don't necessarily know that, so they end up just sort of feeling this resentment, this sort of anger, and so then they end up, instead of focusing on overcoming and working harder, because at the end of the day, regardless of the situation, nothing's ever going to be perfectly fair. And the only thing that you can depend on far as making sure you come ahead is you, despite all these challenges I'm talking about that we can change and should change. One thing you can depend on is you to get yourself out of your situation or to improve your situation. But when you lose focus of that and start focusing so much and just being angry at other people who may have it better than you, or at least you feel, because again, everyone has their problems, then what happens, you become so focused on sort of retaliation, just saying, hey, we need to create policies to just punish those people. You lose focus on what you can do for yourself. And that can sometimes keep you in that policy. Or even worse, you just give up and you just sit there and say, you know what, this is life. And this is just, I'm just going to get by, and get by how I can and just enjoy it, and I'm not going to even entertain the idea of being able to improve my situation because it's just so unfair, I give up. And once you get to that point, once that becomes sort of a growing sentiment, that will keep people poor. Okay, but that there's nothing to do to change that. That is a byproduct of the other two. You can change the cost of living and change what the things that are driving the cost of living. You can change access to opportunities by getting rid of the barriers that are in the way of opportunity. Okay, but then when you talk to sort of the mainstream political thought, left and right, you talk to the left, they kind of just give up. They just assume that this level of riggedness is just natural and always going to happen. So instead of really trying to prevent it or fix it from happening by removing those barriers and removing those policies, they're like, okay, well, this is the way it's going to be. So in this case, the game is always going to be rigged for the rich. So the best thing we can do is we can tax the rich more and use that to at least make the struggle a little bit less from the poor by providing them basic services. But that doesn't necessarily, again, improve their cost of living or improve their access to opportunity. It just sort of dampens the pain of the struggle. And the only real argument for that is, well, if people struggle too much, then they're more likely to start looking into things like criminal activity, stuff like that. So you minimize that, but you're not empowering people when you do that. You're not really fixing the things that are in their way to not just get by, but to thrive. Then when you look a lot of times on the right, they go, well, this is because of moral decay. It's because people have abandoned the institutions that have established the moral codes that would have allowed them to succeed and whatnot. It's all the decay of the moral fabric, and in that case doesn't really lead to many practical steps other than just, hey, everybody, you need to get, embrace moral frameworks and whatnot, or whatever the desired moral framework of those making that argument are. Okay, at the end of the day, libertarians are all about freedom, but at the end of the day, also libertarians very much understand the role of incentives, and the reason we're here is incentives and contacts. People are going to act based on the incentives available to them, and people have an incentive to better themselves and improve their own situation. And this is what basically a lot of these policies that are put into government are oftentimes put in together by individuals who are looking or are lobbied by individuals who are trying to improve their situation, businesses who are trying to prevent competition, labor groups who are trying to prevent competition from cheaper labor. And they put all these rules in to protect themselves, which is rational for them, but then it hurts everybody, increases the cost of living, and which grows poverty and just makes everything much worse, and then we fight each other much worse. So how do you turn that around? That's why it's so important to rethink the role of government, because as long as we see the government as a tool for these kind of actions, then we're always going to be fighting over that tool against each other. But if we take that off the table and say, hey, this is not a tool for rigging the game, or you redefine the game in a way where that's just not even an option, then the only option for us to improve our lives is to be better, okay? To create better products, to be a better worker, to be a more productive, more value-producing individual, because we can't use the government to rig the game. But as long as the government has the power to rig the game, the people who are going to benefit the most from it being rigged are the ones who are going to have the most powerful government, because they have the biggest incentive to do the things it takes to take control of it. So there's no big government that can ever be truly benevolent. It'll always be corrupted. Now, some governments maybe get corrupted more than others, but the more powerful, the bigger the power, the more it's going to attract corruption, and that's going to create all these things that I've talked about before that'll create poverty. So that's something to think about. My name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. You guys have a great day and enjoy.